Hi, today I wanted to talk about David Bowie. Today is the third anniversary of his death. I am a huge fan of his. I've been a David Bowie fan since 1986. His music, his entire presence has been a huge part of my life, and he's meant a lot to me as I've grown from being a young child all the way up until now when I am 40 years old. And I know a lot of times we can look at people who get upset over celebrity deaths or whatever and just, like, oh my God, it's a celebrity. You don't even know this guy. Like, what do you care? Who cares? He's just another dead rich guy. And in a way, I can almost understand a little bit of that. But for a lot of people, David Bowie meant he was like a savior. Like he helped a lot of people through very tough times. And other celebrities are like this too. Like you can fixate on somebody and you're like, I really admire him and like what he stands for and what they talk about and what they've been through. So I don't think it's silly. People that we don't know sometimes can touch our lives in the biggest way. And for me, David Bowie is that person. Um, I was I first became a huge fan of his in 1986. I was 7 years old. I had been aware of David Bowie, I'm sure, prior to then because it was the 80s. David Bowie was very big in the early 80s. I grew up in a house with two older brothers. They were 7 and 10 years older than me. They were very into music. One of my brothers is a musician. And so music was just everywhere. Live Aid happened in my city, Philadelphia. Well, one of the parts of the concert happened in my city, and I remember we taped it on our Betamax, and I would watch it a lot, like over and over again, and I would dance along to it. I would sing all the songs, and I know David Bowie was on that, so I was aware of him. I just wasn't honed in on him, and I wasn't a big fan. But that all changed the summer of 1986. My parents took me to the Eric movie theater in Feasterville, and we saw Labyrinth. And I distinctly remember standing in the lobby of the theater before the movie started, and there was this huge poster advertising the movie, and his head was at the top as a picture of him as Jareth. And I remember looking, going, huh, that looks like a mean lady. I bet she's the bad person in this film. And then, of course, he comes on screen, and obviously not a lady. And then I was just like, mind blown by for whatever reason. I was just hooked. Up until that time, I had been a huge fan of Boy George and Twisted Sister. So clearly, I, from a young age, liked my men in makeup. But on that day, I was like, forget everybody else. This is my guy. I want to know everything about him. We left the movie. We got into my parents' gigantic white station wagon, and I remember leaning over the tan leather seats, and I was like, oh my God, guys, tell me about David Bowie. Who's David Bowie? What does he do? What does he sing? Does he sing songs? Oh my God, tell me everything about him. I was obsessed, and I wanted to know everything right then. But it was 1986. We didn't have the internet. So it was very slow. It was a very slow process learning about him. And back then, we didn't have cable yet either, so we didn't even have MTV, so I didn't really get to see videos. But I remember not long after the movie came out, my brother called me, and I was in my room, and I came running down the stairs, and he's like, I got you a present, and he holds up this little 45, and for the kids these days, a 45 is a very, very tiny little album, a vinyl record, but it was very small. And it was a single for Underground from Labyrinth, and I was like, and I played that over and over and over again while looking at the picture on the cover, which was David Bowie as Jareth, and I was just like, and I also got somewhere not too long after that, he released an album called Never Let Me Down, which may not be his best album, but back then, as a little kid, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever, and I would play it over and over again and look at the liner notes and just be like, you know? And then, time goes on, and I switched schools. I had originally gone to a public school, and in 5th grade, I switched into a Catholic school. And it was a K-8 school, but that was, my middle school years. I was there from 5th grade to 8th grade. And from the very first day, everybody hated me. I came in, and we wore a school uniform. and I wore my socks the wrong way. I didn't wear my socks the cool way. So immediately I was made fun of. The new girl who was wearing her socks in the very dorky way. So, made fun of from the very beginning at that school. They decided day one they didn't like me. I didn't make friends. I didn't fall into that social fold. I would have a couple friends here and there, but they kind of were like, when we were in public, they weren't loving me as much as, when we weren't around other people. They didn't want to be made fun of for being friends with Jen. So, in that school, in our English classes, we would have creative writing books, and we would decorate those books. And I know one year I decorated with tons of pictures of flowers. And in 7th grade, I decided that I wanted to decorate that book with pictures of David Bowie. And at that time, I got a biography of Bowie called Stardust. And that opened up my eyes because it was like everything about him in that book up until 1986. And, but it had tons of pictures in it. So my dad took that book to work and he made a whole bunch of copies of the pictures. And I took those pictures and I put them all over my walls. And I also put them on my creative writing book for school. And it's amazing that I got away with this book in Catholic school because they weren't pictures of like 1983 David Bowie and like his suit and his suspenders. They were pictures primarily of like Ziggy Stardust, a few of the Thin White Duke, but mainly like this is Aladdin Sane. So mainly like this guy, he was in tons of his gender fluid clothing, the red hair, all the makeup, and people were up. Did like the school didn't give a shit. You would think that being in a Catholic school they'd be like, we can't have you with pictures of a dude in women's clothing, but they didn't care, but the kids did. And so every day this one kid would just turn around and look at me from his desk, and then he would look at my book and he'd be like, that guy's a fag, he's a fag. And then other kids would join in. He fucked Mick Jagger. I just saw it on TV. He fucked Mick Jagger. He fucks dudes, which means you must be a dyke because you like this fag. By the way, homos are going to hell because that's against our teaching. So you, because you like this gay guy, must be gay, and you like him, so then you must also be going to hell. Every fucking day it was the same bullshit. Over and over and over again. And what was sad is I would be sitting there in that class with a kid who was gay and who couldn't say that he was gay, but he had to hear it. I don't know if he heard it, but it made me sick. But I was tormented, they would make fun of me for everything anyway. And I had this face here. So this face got made fun of a lot. And back then I had a ton of acne. I still do. My hair was still fucked up because my hair is like this curly, straight, wavy type of texture. So it would be doing all of the things all at once. And I had braces. Everything was just against, I had no hope. So they would just torment me, like physically hurt me, mentally and emotionally just torment me day in, day out, which is a Bowie song, nonstop. People wanted to beat me up because I like David Bowie. So it was a very, very rough time in my life, and I was 12, 13 years old, and this is a time in your life where you're like, your identity is really starting to take hold. You're really forming like who you are. And it's tough being an adolescent and figuring out where you are in that social, what your social standing is. And it's hard when you don't fit in. And it would have been very easy for me to say, I'm getting, I can't change my face. I can't change my hair, but I'm also getting made fun of so much for liking David Bowie. And everyone is really being so mean to me about that. So it would have been easy for me to say, all right, I'm not going to listen to his music. I'm going to change up all my pictures here. I'm going to get rid of my David Bowie pictures. I'm going to go back to flowers or something like that. Just stop making fun of me for the David Bowie thing. It would have been simple to just try to fit in a little bit more by liking the same things that they liked and, getting myself like a New Kids on the Block album. But I didn't. At that time, I had already read the biography Stardust. And what I gained from that was that, David Bowie himself, he'd be made fun of and he would be picked on and he was criticized a lot because he did things that were so against the grain in the 60s and 70s, pushing these gender boundaries and just exploring all these different topics and making music that was at times a little bit odd. He didn't break down from that. He didn't let it, maybe it got to him, maybe it hurt him, maybe it hurt his heart, I don't know. But he didn't let it didn't make him stop. He created what he wanted to create because it made him happy and he felt that this is what he needed to create. And later on, it made other people happy. And he connected with fans and he connected with outsiders and outcasts because he himself was an outsider and an outcast. So he kept on going. And that always from that young age took that with me. Like, here was a guy putting himself out there in front of millions of people all the time, so publicly. And, even though he was going against the grain, he wasn't afraid to do it. He was being true to himself. He was keeping himself happy. And that really stuck with me. So I doubled down. Instead of going and getting and tearing up my creative writing cover and replacing it with like Jordan and Johnny Knight from New Kids, which a lot of the girls did back then, I doubled down and I got a folder, one of my folders, and I decided to tape more pictures of David Bowie, specifically Ziggy Stardust David Bowie, all over it. And I got a necklace. It was a heart, and it said David Bowie on it. And so they freaked the fuck out because, well, number one, obviously they're not beating this person down. Number two, David Bowie was so offensive and so scary to them. So it did not help my problem of getting picked on for any reason whatsoever. I doubled down on expressing who I was, expressing what I liked, listening to the music that I like to listen to. Just, if things like that came up in discussion in class, I would bring him up or I would bring that music up, and I didn't give a crap. And neither did they. They constantly just da 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 da. So, and because of that, because of all of that, the bullying, being made fun of, I was very lonely. And I would cry almost every single night. Like, God, I didn't even ask God to stop the bullying. I asked for a friend. I was like, if I can just have one friend, that one safe place that I could go to and who would be happy to be friends with me, like in public, it would help. And I got that a little bit. I did have, fall in with like a group of friends who were kind of like nerdy like me. We were all into Star Trek and Doctor Who, which back then was not cool the way it is now. But even so, I still wasn't like, I didn't have my needs met the way that I needed them. But, in a lot of those dark times where I was feeling so lonely, where I was feeling like I couldn't escape from all of this, I had his music. And his music made me feel like I wasn't alone. His music made me feel like somebody understood me. It just made me feel like he got me. And I don't know, I related to him so much, and I was always just inspired by how he powered through so much criticism, and he made it, that maybe I could do it as well. And that is really what brought me out of a very, very dark time in my life. And at that age, stuff like that can go down a very, very bad place. It could take you to really horrible behaviors or ways of dealing with your pain. And thankfully, the way that I dealt with my pain was just put on some David Bowie, listen to him, let him say, "Oh no, love, you're not alone," and just really feel it. So I am so thankful that I had him in my life in that way at a time when I needed that the most. And I went through high school, and high school wasn't that much better, but it was not as bad as 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. People were a lot less in my face about it. Because of David Bowie, I joined the drama club because I was like, I want to see what it's like to be a performer. And so I fell in with a crowd of people who were less likely to be accepted in the social fray. But even then, I stood out because I wasn't into a lot of the same again, the same popular things, but also socially, there a lot of drinking went on and stuff like that, and I wasn't into that. So I was still lonely in some respects, but I was more accepted than I was back when I was in middle school. And then I grew up. I went through college and I went through life, and like the whole Bowie thing became less of a, oh my God, that girl's a Bowie fan, and like, oh, there's Jen the dork who also likes David Bowie. So it didn't matter as much, and like I wasn't made fun of as much. But Bowie is somebody who has stuck with me and has been a huge part of my life since that day that I saw him in the Eric movie theater. And there were so many other times in my life where, I was breaking down, and it was his music that really just like pulled me out of like that darkness. And I'm not going to go into all of that now. Otherwise it would be a 45-minute video that nobody's going to watch. This is already long, but maybe, at some point I'll write about it, or maybe I'll do another video about other times in my life. But I'm so thankful that I have had his music to get me through life, and all the happy times, and then all like the truly terrible times. He's just been an absolute godsend to me. And I was definitely very sad when he died. That day is like yesterday to me. I can still feel it. It was the next day. It was January 11th, 5:30 a.m. and I was already at work. I work for a wellness corporation. We open our doors, get to our desks very early. And I remember our maintenance guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey, David Bowie died." And I was like, "Ha, no, he didn't. It was just his birthday. He released an album. He's not dying. He can't die. He's David Bowie." And he was like, "No, no, 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 no." He's like, "I know how much he means to you, and I would never, ever do something like that to you." And it was the way that he said that. I was like, oh, shit. So I just turned on, I went onto Google, typed in David Bowie, and there it was, that after an 18-month long battle with cancer, he died surrounded by his family. So it was a very devastating feeling. I remember that the feeling of like the blood just kind of like rushing down to my feet, and I was just kind of shaky, and I still had 3 hours left of my shift, and I had to like meet with people and speak with people, and I was just like, I just want to go home and stop smiling for everybody because I just want to cry. And my shift ended, and I got in my car and I turned on KYW News Radio, and immediately, as soon as I hit on, it was like, "Let's Dance," and they had a little snippet of that song, and then they started talking about like, "Oh, David Bowie died today." And so I spent my car ride home just like drenched in tears. And I remember being at a stoplight and just looking over at one point, and there was a guy next to me like, clearly, I obviously looked distraught. It was very dramatic. I feel dramatically. It's just who I am. And I got home and I relieved my babysitter and I woke my son up for school, and I was like, oh yeah, David Bowie is dead. And my kids love David Bowie as well. My son especially. David Bowie is kind of part, of his identity. He's a fan. So he went to school that day. He was in 4th grade, I think, in this little David Bowie t-shirt. And so we were all just very sad. But it was nice to see, not nice because it happened, but it was immediately like social media and everything was just like flooded with like, oh my God, this guy is amazing. And it was nice to read like all these stories about how he was so kind and how he was a generous person. And he was, he was a mega superstar in music, but he didn't have that kind of ego. He remained humble. He had an amazing sense of humor about everything, including himself. He had a great zest for life, and he was just genuinely a nice person from all accounts. So it was very comforting to read those things. And like one of the first things that I read, the most comforting thing that I read that day came from Marilyn Manson. And I don't even remember all the words. I remember him talking about his, listening to Diamond Dogs, which is one of my favorite albums. And just saying that he takes comfort in knowing that somewhere out there, David Bowie is somewhere out there, I guess. But it was just so wonderful to see a big outpouring of love for him, and including quite a few of the people who made fun of me in grade school for hating David Bowie. they were posting little things like, oh my God, David Bowie died. That's so sad. And I'm like, took, 30 some years, but you guys got it. So, and a friend of mine even commented, she's like, doesn't that make you mad that like people that made fun of you for liking David Bowie are now like, boo hoo, like David Bowie's dead? And I'm like, no, because I'm glad that at some point in their lives they found him and they maybe got a sense of what I had liked in the first place. So anyway, that is part of my Bowie story. He's still carrying me through right now. I'm going through an absolutely terrible time in my life. I've got a very bad marriage, and he's carrying me through. I've been listening to his music a lot, and the other day, randomly, the song Rock and Roll Suicide came on, and it just brought me to tears because it has this line in it, this, oh no love, you're not alone. And there's this just very nice like series of lines, like not being alone. He's got it. He understands. He's felt your pain. And it just, got me crying and like, oh my God, David Bowie. And that, it just brought me back to that like childhood moment where like, I still have this music to make me feel better, to remind me that, there are dark days, but like I can get through them. So that is it for today. I was all over the place with that, but I just wanted to share a little bit of, my life as a David Bowie fan and what he meant with me, what he meant for me. And of course, since he's gone, I'm wearing my David Bowie shirt today. I got my little David Bowie earrings on that a friend of mine got me for Christmas from, oh God, there was an Etsy shop. What was it called? I think it was called Constant Loveliness. But anyway, I digress. I hope that you somewhat enjoyed listening to me babble on about David Bowie. If you've never listened to him, I encourage you to give him a try. He's got 50 years worth of music, so while some of his music might not be for you, you might find something else that you like. But not everybody likes the same thing, and that's okay. I don't know why I'm still babbling on, so I'm going to stop this. But yeah, David Bowie rules. Bye.